So you can see all mixed up. You know, you've got lava rock, pine bark, topsoil, steer manure, mushroom compost, and it's just great stuff. So you're gonna have great drainage, great aeration, happy trees, no water logging. And that's the biggest issue I run into with, peat moss soils, and why people keep asking me, why do you say no peat moss, no vermiculite? Certain situations, peat moss and vermiculite's great, but when you're trying to grow Japanese maples for longevity in pots, you would rather have a good watering schedule with good draining soil than peat moss and vermiculite waterlogging your soil. So this is the soil that I use, and that's why I quit using peat moss. So on today's episode of What's Been Killing My Tree, I've gotten this, all my trees that I haven't grafted, I've typically gotten on the for sale section just because they weren't doing too well. 50% off at the nursery or whatever at the end of the season. I'm all for it. But the issue with this tree is I had it in peat moss and pine bark, and sure, it has amazing lateral root growth. I'm talking like wild. But I had to get all that peat moss and pine bark out of there because it was starting to rot. See if you can see that. Starting to rot the base of my tree. So I'm not sure if I got the mixture messed up or what, but I'm getting it out of this original peat moss pine bark potting soil and putting it into my original recipe that I showed you guys I mixed up. And I'm going to show you guys how to trim these roots. Even though I don't like trimming roots, I've got to do it. Get this thing in some new fresh soil. It's a happy, healthy tree. A lot of people would probably think that that's canker, but if it's base rot like that, it's probably not canker unless you're starting to see canker in the upper canopy, which there's no signs of canker up here. So from my observations, this is due to too much water logging in the roots, and it's holding too much water, stressing the tree out, and it's starting to, recede away from itself, the bark is. But I've personally seen it grow back over itself, and I'll show you guys that in a minute, on another tree that was planted too deep out in Grandpa and Grandma's yard, and then it wasn't being watered. So not only was it planted too deep, it got drought stressed. So the reason why I know that those scars will heal and why this is worth my time is because at one point this bloodgood had gaps that were as wide as that, but it's been growing back together because I've put it on a regular watering schedule. Not only was it buried too deep, but it just wasn't getting water. So now that it's been getting water and it's not buried too deep, everything's starting to heal back over. It takes some years, but it can definitely do it. And it's a happy, healthy tree. But now it's been a couple of years of being on a regular watering schedule, and that tree's actually growing new bark back. So it's quite fascinating what trees can do. And that's why I experiment with my trees. So I'm gonna come in here, and trimming roots is kind of just like trimming the tree. You wanna look for another little root sticking out like that. Make sure your snips are really clean. I'm gonna be posting a video about how to clean hand snips. And I'm not gonna be too crazy about like perfect cut placement on the roots, but there's a lot of nice healthy roots in here. So, and the tree, thank God, didn't get root rot yet in that waterlogged soil. Went through the whole winter season, and I don't water my trees in the winter, and this thing was just still waterlogged, and I still hadn't watered it. So I was a little concerned about what was going on with these roots. So that's why I'm trying to come in here, cut some of these dead ones out, get some air in here. Sometimes trees that have been waterlogged in a pot for a long time, it's actually good to expose them to oxygen for a little while, just because they haven't really gotten that oxygen for this one for at least a year. So I made the mistake of too much peat moss, too much pine bark, and it wasn't the original potting soil that I used to use 6 years ago. So the last 3 years to a year ago, my trees have been pretty stressed out. So I want to get them fixed, happy, healthy, and then over time I'll show you guys that these scars like this could potentially heal. So as long as it's not showing signs of actual fungus, canker, verticillum wilt, that sort of thing, we'll fix it, and I'll show you. So stay tuned. You can see we have a lot of nice, happy, healthy roots, those light colored roots in there. And this root that's sticking out over here, I'm not too excited about that. So we have another couple lateral roots in here that are growing out this way. I'm going to cut that root that's sticking out here back to those little lateral roots. And again, make sure you have really clean hand snips when you're doing this process, because you don't want to, in a tree that's healthy like this, other than it being waterlogged, you don't want to introduce any kind of disease or bacteria into these root systems in here. So I've got another root that's all curly in here, and that's one of its main tap roots, so I'm not going to worry too much about cutting that one off. Just going to deal with it. So, and over time with this tree, it may be a culprit for me training something into its root system. You know, this is what I look for in trees. Like if you look at my shorts video of a Japanese maple, I trained petrified wood chunks into its root system. This is what I found in that tree's root system originally, before I started training chunks of petrified wood into those open spots. So trees are so interesting. I mean, I think if you don't follow the book and you just follow what the trees are telling you, you can do a lot more than what people think you can, especially if you have all, I mean, I do experiments with my trees because I'm willing to learn, you know, is this something that I can do? Is it possible? Because trees are very capable of a lot of things that we're not aware of. So let's get into repotting this thing. So now we've got that fresh potting soil I showed you guys I mixed up, and it's got the lava rock, steer manure, mushroom compost, topsoil, forest product, you know, like pine bark, hemlock bark. We got perlite in there. So as I say in every video, compact the edges. I hate to kind of be repetitive, but this one I'm gonna mound some soil in the bottom, just because I cut some roots and I've actually got it pretty bare rooted. There's not much soil left in there. Well, there wasn't really soil in there, it was peat moss. So let's grab the tree and put it in this pot. I'm gonna take its roots and kind of drape them over the little bit of a mound in that pot, and it doesn't look like I have enough potting soil in there, so throw a couple more scoops. And as I always say, compact the edges, and we've got kind of a mound in there that we can drape the roots over. Come in here like that. Separate the roots a bit, and we're going to start to fill this up. You're going to want to make sure you keep those roots nice and exposed up here at the top. You aren't planting it too deep. I like to go in here with my soil scooper and push down the edges. It helps get the air bubbles out too. And when you do your first watering, it gets the air pockets out. You know, you do like your first and second watering. And considering this tree is kind of loose in the pot from it have been bare rooted, depending on where I place it, I might give it some support, but I don't like to support my trees because it stops them from growing their own supportive root system. So if you are going to support it, then only support it for its first 6 months of growth. Sometimes you won't support them at first and then come back and support them later, just depending on the situation. I don't typically support my trees in pots though. If you put them in a pot correctly, you shouldn't need support. So, I'm gonna get a little bit more soil around the edges. Call that good. And if your water's been sitting in the sun, like mine has, or your hose, I should say, let it run for a second. Get some water in this soil. You can see the drainage is just immediate. Not too much puddling. It's gonna drain. There's no air bubbles. Give it a nice new soak, and sometimes after you give it its first watering, you might have to put a little bit more soil in the pot, but I like having roots like this exposed. It causes them to oxidize, but that's just me. It's kind of a scientific thing that I do with a lot of my trees, is leave the roots exposed.